Hi, I'm Cami Emery. I'm Associate Professor at Bossier Parish Community College. What we're going to be talking about today is basic path as food travels through our digestive system. What you can see here on the board, I've kind of divided out between a mechanical column and a chemical column as far as are we mechanically breaking down the food, or are we chemically breaking down the food. So where we start is in the oral cavity. We have a torso here where you can actually see some of the components we're going to be talking about. Within the torso, in the oral cavity, you can see the tongue exists there. We also have three little glands hanging out right here. Well, these white things in the front, hopefully you know what those are. Those are teeth. And the teeth are going to chew the food up, something we actually call mastication. As we chew the food up, we mechanically break that food down. But in the mechanical process of breaking the food down, we're going to add enzymes from these three salivary glands. We have the parotid salivary gland, the sublingual, and the submandibular. Those three salivary glands are going to release an amylase, which is actually an enzyme that's going to help break down simple carbohydrates. Once we've chewed the food up, what we chew up in the mouth is formed into what's called a bolus, and that bolus is going to slide down the esophagus. If we take off the heart here, we can see a little bit of this brown tube, which is actually the esophagus. Esophagus does nothing mechanically or chemically for our food. It's just going to transport the food from the oral cavity down into the stomach. So we're going to transport it right through this little region of the diaphragm. The esophagus actually goes through a small opening and the food enters the stomach. What we're going to do in the stomach is mostly break down the food chemically. We're going to add acids, hydrochloric acid being one, and pepsin being another one. Pepsin actually becomes pepsinogen as is exposed to hydrochloric acid. Now, another thing that's inside the stomach, which is a great idea, are some mucus cells which produce mucus, which actually coat the lining of the stomach. Therefore, these acids don't hurt the inside of our stomach. They're just there to break down the foods. As we've broken those foods down, we're going to move the foods into the small intestines. I'm going to remove the stomach here so you can kind of see where that's going. It's going to go through this little opening right here. The small intestines in this little curve is called the duodenum. Inside the duodenum, we're actually going to add the secretions from the pancreas, which are going to be other digestive enzymes, and from the liver and the gallbladder, which is going to be bile. The liver is going to produce the bile, the gallbladder is going to store it until we need it, but bile is going to be used to emulsify fats. The enzymes that the pancreas produces are going to further break down the foods that we've eaten. So after we've put it into the duodenum, the food's going to move into a section that's called the ileum and into the jejunum. Now inside of the ileum and the jejunum, we have villi. What villi are microscopic structures that have blood vessels inside of them, mostly capillaries, and wrapped in the very center of that capillary is a little structure called a lacteal. The lacteals are going to start absorbing the fats that we've broken down using the bile, and that capillaries are going to be used to absorb all the other nutrients. Now this fellow right here that I had removed from that segment is the liver, and that's where we're going to be producing the bile. This little green structure on the underside, on the inferior side, is considered the gallbladder, and that's a storage pocket for the bile. So we're going to move through the duodenum. We're going to add secretions also from the pancreas. So in the duodenum, we're getting from the pancreas, the gallbladder, and the liver substances that are going to further break down the food that we pushed down from the stomach. It's going to move through the small intestines, and as we move through the small intestines, we're going to go into this first segment of the large intestines. Now, a good portion of our food has been absorbed through the villi within the ileum and the jejunum. And as we've moved through, we've left some substances that we haven't quite utilized yet. Those are first going to be pushed into the cecum of the large intestines, up the ascending colon, across the transverse, down the descending, into the sigmoid, and it's going to be stored into the rectum until it's appropriate for us to excrete it out of the body. So when we look at the segments of the large intestines, we actually start at the very lower right-hand side called the cecum. Now our appendix comes off of the cecum. Appendix produces some enzymes that further break down some of the fibers in our food. The cecum turns into the ascending, so we're actually traveling up the right side of the torso, across the transverse, down the left side, the descending, and then to an S-shaped segment, S-shaped, hard to say, but it's the sigmoid colon. And then we'll store the remains in the rectum. Now, where we absorbed mostly nutrients and we were able to emulsify the fats using the bile from the gallbladder, and we sorbed that into the lacteals, the stuff that we absorb within the large intestines is a lot of the vitamins that remained within the food that was moving through, and also the water component. Our large intestines primarily absorb the water into our digestive system, putting it back into the bloodstream. So when we store it inside the rectum, what we actually have as feces is primarily water. Those who have problems with excreting those substances typically lack water within their diet. So it's a pretty simple path, but a lot of things happening as we move through it.